Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video we are going to be doing a zero waste recipe. So I'm really excited to share this with you guys because this has actually been my first few times trying this out and kind of incorporating this into my cooking and my zero waste lifestyle. And that is to make your own vegetable broth with kitchen scraps. So it's completely free. I mean, obviously you had to buy your produce, but you're using the leftover parts that you would normally just toss in the trash, and you make this wonderful vegetable broth, and it's seriously good, and I'm going to show you how to do so in this video. So this whole process is fairly simple, and once you do it once or twice, you really get the hang of it and you don't even need my directions anymore. So the first thing you're gonna do is to keep all of your cooking scraps. Now, if you're someone like me, I eat a plant-based diet, so a majority of my food comes from plants, so I'm always chopping things, cutting things, throwing them into all my meals. So I accumulate vegetable scraps rather quickly. If you are not someone who is like that though, don't worry, you can still do this. The things that I particularly like to keep are onion peels, or the end of an onion, just the whole end of the onion with the peel and everything, garlic peels, or ends of garlic, or garlic that is about to go bad. I know a lot of times our garlic tends to get dried out, so I will just chuck a few of those cloves in. Carrot ends, zucchini ends, kind of just the stem part that you chop off. You can do kale stems, you can do herb stems, you can do broccoli and cauliflower, kind of like the part that you cut all the florets off of. You can do orange peel and lemon peel if you want to add kind of a citrusy undernote. If it has a root or a stem or a core or a peel and it's a vegetable and you think that it would give a good flavor to broth, keep it. So then if you have all of these scraps and all of these things that you've been keeping, you want to put them in the freezer. So the freezer will keep them from going bad. It will kind of like stall them at their current state. So if you have stuff that is kind of starting to go bad, but it's still edible, it's still good to use, chuck it in the freezer and it will stop. It will not go bad. I like to use a Ziploc bag. I have like an old Ziploc bag and I just use that same Ziploc bag and I keep filling it up with scraps. I dump the scraps in the pot and then I just put it back in the freezer and I fill it with more scraps. You can also recycle a bread bag. Bread that comes wrapped in plastic, you can just recycle one of those plastic bread bags, or if you'd like to invest in a silicone stasher bag, I will leave a link to one in the description box, and you can use a zero waste option. So once your bag gets kind of full, I usually wait until mine is pretty full or halfway full, or until I really need broth again. You want to take it out of the freezer and just leave it on the counter for a little bit because mine tend to clump into like one solid mass, so you just kind of want to take it out of the freezer and let it defrost a bit just till you can like break everything up and separate all the pieces into a pot. So it doesn't need to be long, it doesn't need to be for an entire day or anything. Probably anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour would be plenty of time. Once the contents of your freezer bag have kind of defrosted a bit, you're going to want to bring a big stock pot to heat with some oil in it. So I like to use a big stock pot because I like to make a lot of broth at once. If you're only making like one serving of broth, use whatever pot you have. But personally, I only like to do this every month, so I make a ton of broth. So you're gonna want to heat the pot with some oil. Once it's hot, dump everything into the pot. All of your fruits, veggies, peels, stems, everything. You're gonna wanna saute it. Now this is an extra step, but I've found that by doing this, it just adds so much more flavor to the broth and the final result. You're gonna wanna saute everything just until it starts to get some color and it kind of has an aroma to it. So once everything is completely defrosted and it starts to brown a little bit, you'll be able to tell when it's done. You really can't mess this up unless you burn everything. Once you feel satisfied with everything and the way it's smelling, fill the pot with water. So for reference, I'll do anywhere from 8 to 10 cups of water at a time. So after filling your pot with water, however many cups you decided on, you're going to want to bring that to a boil. So once it's boiling, you want to let this simmer uncovered for about 40 minutes. You want to let this simmer for a while because you're letting all of the flavors kind of develop and soak into that water. After 40 minutes, you should notice that your water level has kind of reduced down a little bit, which is completely normal. So if you are making this for like a specific recipe and the recipe calls for say 2 cups of broth and you only put 2 cups in, you're gonna end up with a little bit less. So always put maybe like an extra half cup to a cup and expect it to go down a little bit. After it's done simmering, you can let it cool down a bit. I generally tend to let it cool because I put mine in glass jars for storing, so you don't want to put piping hot liquid into glass jars. And once it's kind of cooled down, I strain out the scraps. Now I compost the scraps to create a completely like zero waste loop for this entire project. I highly encourage you to do the same if you don't have a compost system. I am going to be doing a video on composting soon. If you aren't already composting, if you know someone who does, see if you can just like hand them your kitchen scraps when you're done with them. Or you can also look into if there's compost pickup in your area. Personally, we don't have that where I live, which is why I have a personal compost. So do what works for you. If you absolutely cannot compost, if you're going to throw them in the trash, make sure you're using compostable trash bags that will break down so that your compostable items aren't just trapped in a plastic bag. So after that, you're pretty much done. When it comes to storing this, like I said, I keep this in glass mason jars. I use wide mouth glass mason jars because they freeze better. I can do an entire video on how to freeze in glass because I know a lot of people are kind of weary about that and like think the glass is gonna shatter all over the place. I haven't had one glass break on me yet. Knock on wood. Yeah, I haven't had any glasses break because I'm really careful about how I store them and I store them properly. If you don't have glass, you can store them in containers. Containers that are good for freezing are like leftover Chinese food containers, not the paper cartons, but the plastic ones that they usually give you like soup in or something. Those work perfectly fine for freezing. You can just do them in any kind of container you have if you don't have glass available. I do recommend freezing this because it's only going to stay good for about 5 to 6 days in the fridge. Now if you're going to use it in 5 or 6 days, by all means just put it in a jar, put the lid on, stick it in the fridge, it'll stay good until you need it. But in the freezer, it can last up to 6 months. One or two jars in the fridge to use, and I keep the rest in the freezer. One thing to note, if you are going to pour the hot broth into a mason jar or a glass jar, to run that glass jar under hot water and make sure that the jar itself is warm to the touch, because you don't want to put hot water into a cold jar or cold water into a hot jar. So that's kind of how you break glass. So just run it under hot water, get it nice and hot. You'll be able to feel it. If the glass feels warm, you're good to pour your hot broth in there. So that's just kind of a safety tip for you. That is pretty much it. As you can see, the process is fairly simple and I highly encourage you to give it a try because it's just a great way to create something out of garbage essentially, and I really like cooking that way. I like finding ways to create food and create meals in a low waste way. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss when I post a new video. And with that, I will see you guys in my next video.